I've got memories of all the cases I've attended, and there are thousands and thousands of murder cases. I've seen a lot.
Anton Crawford is a forensic detective. During his 25 years in the police, he's attended and investigated more than 2,000 murder scenes and many more rapes, robberies and thefts. Crawford is one of South Africa's most experienced policemen, a man at the forefront of fighting crime in a brutal and violent society. This is the story of his life, his times, his nightmares, of a policeman who has seen too much.
I can remember the smell of the blood, that horror inside. I can relive it totally. I'm tired. Physically, emotionally, I'm tired. I don't know if it is because of all the scenes, because of all the gruesome stuff that I see. Maybe this stuff entered my head. Maybe it created another Anton Crawford. That I can't say. Farm murders to me is probably one of the worst crime scenes that you can get, because in most cases it's elderly people. They've got no chance. The way these elderly people are actually murdered in cold blood. It gives me a lot of hassles. I can't take it. I drank a lot of sleeping pills. Nightmares galore. The most beautiful movies you can imagine. In a lot of those nightmares, I actually was dying. I always dreamt I was shot up into pieces, or I was trying to kill somebody and that person didn't want to die. I'm a cowboy. Policemen, we are tough cops. We're not there for pills, taking medication. We're good guys, man. Cowboys don't cry. But today I know cowboys do cry. If I maybe didn't work so hard, maybe I shouldn't have been so dedicated. Maybe I should have done an office job, or probably would have become a teacher. I don't know.
Anton Crawford grew up in a traditional Afrikaner home. His father was a brigadier in the police. When the time came for the 18-year-old Anton to do national service, he followed in his father's footsteps.
And I remember this little boy sitting in the train with tears streaming down his face because he was leaving home.
It was so intense at that stage, and I enjoyed it so much. I decided, no, teacher is not for me. I will rather be a policeman like my father, because he was my role model.
But never in my wildest dreams did I think that my soft son, as I could say, would experience the things he did.
And I started specializing in the type of work: forensics, photography, fingerprints. And I started getting acquainted with this type of job. The more I did it, the more I wanted to do it.
He's doing a job, the criminal. And if he is making a mistake in his job, he's going to jail. And that is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to pick up that mistake, to send that criminal to jail.
We must collect all the evidence, say for instance human hair, human tissue, blood.
We are the persons that is doing the work in the blood and the mud and on the scene.
It's not a pleasant work. It's a very unpleasant work, because I only see bad things.
Touch the bodies, visit the scene, turn over the body, search for clues.
We actually make parties with that body, because that body must give me evidence, that person lying dead there.
We are finding the fingerprints, we are connecting the suspect with the scene.
For me, it is more gruesome attending the post-mortem. There's that person lying on a cold cement slab inside the mortuary, and I still have to work with his body. I have to put on gloves, I have to look for projectiles and all that stuff.
Shortly after joining the police, Crawford was confronted with his first murder scene.
It was a Portuguese man. He had a shop in Roodekrans in Roodepoort, and two guys stopped outside and they threw a brick through the window. And then he actually went outside and fired a shot with a shotgun. And both the occupants, their heads were blown off.
he many times phoned me, very heartsore, very heartbroken at what he'd just seen.
I told all the guys at the barracks, I told them, "You, I saw a good one now." But I can't remember that stage, it actually, the nightmare started at that stage. I was a bit shaky, I know.
He always wanted to be there. Wherever there was action, if you want to call it action, or violence, he made sure that he was there.
I want to emphasize, I hate the criminal, I hate him with passion. They were murdered in cold blood, a lot of policemen. In all the serious cases where policemen were killed. That's probably where I got my knock, because I'm used to seeing so many dead people. I get used to it, but then you see dead policemen. There was a lot of times that I couldn't talk. I didn't want to talk. You keep it inside, and aggressive moods. I know sometimes I lost my temper. I know there were small things that ignited me.
He was a very agitated person. Started losing his temper quite easily.
All the dreams I had, I'm always fighting with somebody. It's never a nice dream. It was a war zone. To me, it was war all the time.
In the late 80s and early 90s, Anton Crawford served as a forensic detective in Soweto. He was in command of all forensic investigations in the area.
In the difficult times, when it was at its peak, we probably saw about 30 to 40, maybe 50 bodies a day.
You just receive one case after the next. There's a murder here, rush out to that area, then off to Meadowlands and back to Orlando.
We slept in the car at night. You didn't even go home. You were too tired to go home. You just slept in the car outside the office. I attended scenes where the guy was still alive. I tried to speak to him, but you can't touch him because it's so hot around the flames and all that stuff, and he was still smoldering.
To stand there, totally helpless, you can't do a thing, you can't help him. All I remember him asking was for water all the time.
Innocent bystanders just getting shot up into pieces. Suburban trains passing through, people just flying like leaves from a tree, just being popped out of the train, just being thrown in front of another train.
This one specific day, it was from one station to the next station, where all these people were being murdered at the railway station, and he still referred to those instances that day as the Battle of Blood River.
The station is unknown, but this period of time.
And I looked left up the road, and all I saw was a mass of people coming down the road. And I said to him, "Major, look to the left."
Out of nowhere, about 100 people came down the streets chanting songs and singing and brandishing pangas and sticks and assegais.
They were all armed, and this group was going to attack.
And they were coming for us, and they said, I couldn't stop the vehicle and turn around. It was too late. We would never have made it. And there was this guy running towards me with a petrol bomb, and the moment his arm went back, I decided in a question of seconds, skid, fire. All that I can think of is the fact that I saw this person flying through the air. It looked like he was diving into a pool.
Because it was horrific. And yeah, I think that has got a large impact on his situation.
Nobody talked to me afterwards. I never received any counseling. I worked at that night till up to about 11 o'clock, and I went home.
Well, the phone rang one morning, I think it was 2 o'clock, and all I heard was this person that was crying on the phone. Then I discovered it was my son. And he told me that he just had to shoot a man.
I think from that night, probably that was one of the greatest influences in my life. I had one hell of a lot of nightmares. I didn't sleep at night.
He should have gone off medically unfit for his stress.
Conversation sometimes started good, and then suddenly I just snapped and exploded, literally exploded. My wife told me that, listen, you must get help. And I thought, yeah, man, why must I get help? I'm okay. I'm a cowboy. I don't need help.
He told me he always thinks of committing suicide all the time. And I begged him and told him that it's not the solution.
I thought, but why can't this stuff stop? Why do you have to go on? Finish it off, man. Maak klaar.
I never knew that things like that had entered his mind because he comes out of a religious home.
I told him you must just pray and hope the Almighty will help you.
And so I went into my room and I sat on the bed and I cocked the pistol. And then I thought, but listen, you must remember to shoot with the left hand because I'm left-handed. That when the guys come out for forensics, they must do the primary residue on your left hand. But they all knew it. And I thought, maybe I just dropped them a letter. Onthou ek is linkshandig hoor. I'm left-handed. And then, as I sat, the sun was shining through the window, and I took the gun and I saw the bullet inside. I could see it in the sunlight, and I checked it so. I thought, I hope it's not here. I hope it goes quickly. And I again put it to my head. And then several times I was not sure where to put the barrel. And at the stage it was right next to my ear. And then I thought, but if I fell forward, you know, my wife's going to have a battle cleaning this stuff up because I was sitting on the edge of the bed, so I wanted to do it so that I can fall forward onto the floor. And I thought to myself, but your vrou gaan sukkel om hierdie gemors skoon te maak hoor. Because I know there's a lot of brains coming out. And if I'm not dying quickly, the blood will still be pouring out, pumping. So then I put the gun down. And then I actually started laughing. I thought, nee man, you're stupid man. It's simple. Hoekom jy nou skiet? Wag, jy kan op 'n ander dag, you can do it another day. And that's also during the same period that my wife actually demanded that I go and see somebody.
He really needs great counseling. He's no more Anton we used to know.
The person I first went to see in Krugersdorp, he told me that, listen, you're a horrible case of post-traumatic stress disorder. I knew that I took a knock somewhere. I knew something was wrong. And but I thought, let's drink some pills, man. I'll cope again. Sal weer regkom.
Diagnosed with post-traumatic stress, the police decided it was time for him to work in a quiet and more relaxed environment. He was transferred from Soweto in 1993. At the end of 1993, Anton Crawford was put in charge of forensic investigations in Witbank.
We're like a family. We can't work without the guy. He's got I think he's the best in South Africa. I don't think there's another commander like him.
Please be with us this morning, throughout the day. Could you please be with everybody that doesn't have a place to sleep tonight, my God? To everybody that doesn't have anything to eat today, my God. I'm asking all this because I know that you will.
I'm so glad when we attend the scene and we can solve it, and it gives me so much determination to go. It gives me a kick in the butt. It makes me go, okay, now can you weer bietjie aangaan. Now you can go on for a while.
But since he arrived there, he's first there, even if he's in the township. He doesn't say this is a white farmer, this is a black farmer, no.
Teamwork is, for me, is very important. I can't, all this stuff that I attended, I can't do it alone. There were guys that followed me, and we were a close-knit unit. We went for it. We went for gold.
We support rival teams. I support Orlando Pirates, and he supports Kaizer Chiefs. And if Pirates lost, I know he's the first to call me and say, hey, what happened to Pirates?
Maybe God can give me just some more reserve power. I believe in God, and maybe He can just give me a little more power to do my job. I feel I can still deliver a service to somebody somewhere.
Coming to the job, he still do the job perfectly, but you can see he's forcing himself. The heart is there, but the mind is no more there.
It breaks me completely down. I can recall a case here in Witbank where a little child was mauled by a dog, and the father actually pleaded with me, please, just take the dogs away. And I actually attacked the dog. I actually grabbed the dog. He tried to bite me, but I actually attacked the dog from behind. And I tried to strangle the dog.
While informing me about the incidents, he was having tears running from his eyes. Then you could see that this person's heart is very painful.
In 1995, a small community in Mpumalanga was stunned when the town's state prosecutor went berserk and killed 6 people.
If somebody asks me, what is the worst case, I will relive this case of Carolina.
3 policemen and an entire family were wiped out.
It's on a Saturday morning at about 3 o'clock. The guys from Ermelo phoned me. They told me, listen, the word that he said, he's big shit. I told him, listen, hou alles net, keep everything just like it is. I'm coming.
Die voertuig is aangetref voor die woning met 2 polisiebeamptes binne in die voertuig.
And then we came to the farmhouse. And I stopped and there's a police vehicle. There's 2 dead policemen inside. Head wounds, close range.
A police chaplain was called to the scene to bring comfort to the policemen there.
I mean, the doves were singing and things like that. But it was as if whole nature said, death is present here. Even you could have feel it among your body, as if I don't want to be here.
Nobody knows why State Prosecutor Mani van Aert chose the Darfel family as his target.
Went inside, yes, the person, Mr. Darfel, he was handcuffed, he was beaten up, he was shot.
That's what hell must be. You even could smell the fumes of hell.
And then when I saw the bodies of Mrs. Darfel and the daughter,
Fanny Darfel was forced to watch their rape and torture.
It really went into my mind that this is a house of horror.
It doesn't matter how you block out your brain. That the moment you saw it, it was actually, you couldn't believe it. It was terrifying.
And it's as if we were trembling, actually.
I actually went numb. I thought, but it can't be. Those people were brutally terrorized, assaulted. I think they went through hell. I can only describe it as hell. I can't think of another word.
Langs aan 'n knopkie. In 'n patroondopie langs.
He organized us into specific jobs. You were responsible for the photos, you are responsible for the forensics, you are responsible for the fingerprints.
It was so tense, but it was so, what I can remember that nobody talked. Because I think the guys couldn't believe this.
Weer verder af in die gang. Laaste kamer aan die linkerkant. In die deur van die kamer is 'n patroondopie aangetref.
The leadership that we've got from him at that stage was actually outstanding. He knew exactly what had to be done, and we do it like that.
Merk op die grond wat vermoedelik bloed kan wees.
And then, by some means or another, they sent in the chaplain. He asked if he can come in, Chaplain Krog. And he actually talked to us and he prayed.
Now I said to Jesus, and I said to him, Jesus, will you please give us the strength of your Holy Spirit and give us the calmness and the peace now for every one of these members here.
Mani van Aert was killed later that day in a shootout with police, but not before he'd killed 3 policemen.
I just went home. I tried to go and sleep that afternoon. I just wanted to be alone. I just wanted to be alone.
And Anton himself also talked a lot about that this thing hurts. He talked about especially about pain.
I can recall every detail. I can recall the smell. I can describe all the stuff inside, furniture. But then it's something cold grabs me.
But the pain for him, I would say in his innermost being, the pain is too much to bear.
Medic alert bandjie wat
I can see myself walking inside the room. I can see myself bending at the body or removing exhibits or collecting exhibits.
Die vertrek is 'n laaikas aangetref met 'n laai oop.
And then I went to see a psychiatrist again, and this guy said, "No, listen, there's no future for you. You must leave the force now. I can help you." So I told him, "No ways. I'm still young. I can give me a paar pills, I'm okay. Just give me some pills, I'll pop it and I'll go on again.
Attending farm murder scenes has become an almost daily activity for Anton Crawford and his team of field workers. In 1998, he was called out to the farm Klipplaat Drif, belonging to the Robertses.
Waar 'n blanke moord plaasgevind het.
And one of the guys phoned me from the scene. He told me, listen, you've got one hell of a murder scene here. So I went and I phoned several of my guys. I told him, listen, I need speed. I need dedication. Right, get in your car and move.
And you could realize that there was really a war there. And it was really shocking.
These people are coming from church, God-loving, law-abiding citizens.
And then when they come back from the church, the suspects were already inside the house.
Their bodies were dragged to the dining room, and they were shot at close range, and afterwards the Bible and the book of hymns and all that stuff was thrown onto the bodies.
I thought maybe it's Satanism taking place there.
So vanaf die eetkamer.
And then we went to one of the outside buildings, and there we saw Mr. Brits. He was actually tied up. There was a towel around his head. He was shot at close range. Big pool of blood.
To find a deceased in full pool of blood and to shift him with your own hands, and it's very difficult. But he has to do that.
And then we started fingerprint investigation. We vacuumed the whole house. We took blood samples.
We found lots and lots of fingerprints. I lifted, I think, 47 or 49 Folines. Foline is the medium that we used to lift the fingerprints with.
They were both linked with fingerprints. I was so glad I actually jumped with joy. Because we know this is a final nail in their coffin. Ons het hulle, we've got them.
The first one arrested showed us the second one. And we found the firearm there, which belongs to the deceased.
But they both got lifelong sentences. And what was great for me was the family was also there. And I could see in their eyes that they were grateful. Well, it started in January last year. My wife and I had a big argument, and I actually grabbed her by the shoulders. And I told her, stop it, stop it. But then afterwards we went to the room, the whole family, and we prayed. And then I asked God, something is wrong with me. And I prayed and I told them, and I promised them that I will go for counseling, I will go for help.
He's no more joking like before. And last when I met him, he told me he's staying in a barracks because he's got a problem at his home.
She told me that she wants a divorce. So I actually pleaded with her. I really pleaded because I felt, man, listen, man, give me a chance. I finally went for help. I think this hospital helped me. Give me a chance, but it was too late, and I had to accept it. It probably broke me down forever, but I had to accept the fact that after 20 years of marriage, it is over.
If you speak to him, he will tell you, but also, I've got nothing. I have to start afresh. I've got only the clothes I've got.
I thought, maak klaar man, finish it off. And I wanted the people, I even wanted to draft a letter. Don't cry on my funeral. Wees dankbaar. But then the thing that kept me also alive is my sons. I'm very much in love with my sons. I've got two wonderful kids, and I thought, what would their image be of their father? This cowboy that all the years went through all the stages and saw all the stuff. And now suddenly, because he can't cope, he kills himself and he leaves us behind. And that's the one thing that, it's the thing that it's out of my mind now.
You mustn't believe that taking your life will help, because life comes once.
Well, presently, I'm still in the mud trying to cope with it. divorce. I recently met somebody. We became engaged 2 weeks ago. The only future I have now is probably to get married again, still to see my children, trying to get a decent place to stay, a little house or a cottage or something, and slowly get back into the circle of life. I've also lost my pride, my self-esteem. I'm down and out. I've lost probably all the goals in life went down with one big bang.